The sun was dipping behind the Lagos skyline, casting a golden glow over the elegant rooftop of Victoria Island. The air buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music as the city's elite gathered to celebrate Chike's 60th birthday. Amara stepped out of the sleek black car, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and took a deep breath. Tonight was special, not just because it was her father's milestone birthday, but because she had something extraordinary planned. She adjusted the folds of her outfit, a stunning design she had created herself, every stitch reflecting hours of passion and precision. People turned their heads as she passed, some whispering, some smiling. She kept her eyes focused, carrying with her a beautifully wrapped package, a rare painting her father had been dreaming about for years. The thought of seeing his face light up made her heart race with excitement. From across the room she spotted her mother, Ifeoma. Even from a distance, her cold, distant gaze was unmistakable. She was surrounded by a cluster of family friends, smiling politely, but her eyes barely glanced at Amara. A small knot of unease formed in Amara's stomach, but she pushed it down. Tonight was about her father, about the love and admiration she had for him, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone ruin it. Taking another deep breath, Amara stepped further into the crowd, feeling the anticipation buzz through her. The city lights shimmered behind the skyline, the music floated through the air, and somewhere in the room her father's laughter reminded her why she was here. Ready to surprise him, ready to shine, ready to claim a moment all her own. Amara felt her heart pounding as she made her way through the crowd, the beautifully wrapped painting clutched in her hands. She spotted her mother, Ifeoma, standing near the center of the rooftop, surrounded by family and friends, her posture perfect, her smile polite but cold. Amara's chest tightened, but she forced herself to smile. Tonight wasn't about old grudges. It was about love, about celebrating her father. "Mom," Amara said softly, stepping closer, her arms open for a hug. He wanted to share the excitement, the warmth, the moment. Her smile was genuine, her eyes shining. But before she could even reach her, Ifeoma leaned slightly forward, her voice low but sharp enough for those nearby to hear. "Don't embarrass yourself. Stand aside. You're not part of this celebration," she whispered, her words dripping with disdain. Gasps rippled through the guests. Aunts and uncles exchanged shocked looks. Some whispered to each other, their voices trembling with disbelief. Amara froze, the painting suddenly feeling heavier in her hands. Her stomach knotted, and for a moment all the excitement and joy she had felt moments ago seemed to vanish. But she didn't cry. She didn't shout. She stayed composed, her hands gripping the gift just a little tighter. She could feel eyes on her, some curious, some sympathetic, some judging, but she forced herself to take a slow, steady breath. Her mother's words were meant to humiliate her, to make her disappear in front of everyone she cared about. And yet Amara refused to let them break her tonight. Whispers and side glances floated through the air. People were shocked, unsure of how to react. Some stared openly, sympathy flickering in their eyes. Others whispered, hiding their shock behind polite smiles. Amara's heart hurt, yes, but a small flame of determination began to burn inside her. She would not let this public rejection define her. Not tonight. Straightening her shoulders, Amara turned her focus back to her father, to the celebration, and to the surprise she had come to share. Ifeoma could try to dim her light, but Amara knew one thing. Tonight her moment had only just begun. Amara's mind drifted back, the voices and laughter of the party fading into memories that had haunted her for years. She was a little girl again, standing nervously in front of a classroom display, her painting carefully framed, colors bright and bold. She had waited all day for her mother's praise, hoping Ifeoma would see her effort. But her mother had barely glanced at it, muttering instead, "Why can't you be more like your cousin? At least she won something this year." The words had cut deeper than she could explain, leaving a small ache in her chest that never really went away. As she grew older, the pattern continued. Amara remembered the day she got into art school, an achievement she had worked tirelessly for. She ran home, bursting with excitement, ready to tell her mother. Ifeoma had barely looked up from her phone, sighing, "It's not like it's Harvard. Don't get your hopes too high." Amara had forced a smile, swallowing the disappointment, learning early that her victories would never be enough in her mother's eyes. Her teenage years brought fashion shows and small competitions, moments where she tried to shine in the world she loved. She would design outfits, spend sleepless nights perfecting every stitch, only to have Ifeoma glance once, shrug and say, "Why waste your time?" Real success comes from something more practical. Even small things. Amara winning a local art contest, getting recognition from teachers, or being complimented by peers were quietly dismissed. Her achievements were invisible, overshadowed by cousins who seemed to do no wrong, peers who were always better. Those memories were sharp, fresh, as if they had happened yesterday. Every rejection, every comparison, every minimized victory had built a quiet, simmering pain in her heart. The sting of tonight's public rejection wasn't just about a single whispered insult in front of guests. It dug into decades of being unseen, unheard, undervalued. Amara clenched her fists, her chest tightening, but she reminded herself, those years of dismissal, of invisibility, had also taught her resilience. They had shaped her into someone who could stand strong, someone who could face Ifeoma's cold words without crumbling. The pain was real, but so was her determination. Tonight she would show the world, and her mother, that all those years of being overlooked were about to be rewritten. Amara took a slow, steadying breath, letting the tension in her shoulders ease just a little. The whispers and side glances from the crowd no longer mattered. Tonight wasn't about her mother's cruelty, it was about her father, about the man who had always quietly supported her dreams, even when no one else had. She lifted her chin and began moving through the crowd with purpose, the beautifully wrapped gift cradled carefully in her arms. Her father, Chaik, was laughing at something one of his old friends had said, the corners of his eyes crinkling with joy. When he finally looked up and saw her approaching, his face softened instantly. There was a spark in his eyes, a warmth that only a child could evoke in a parent. Amara felt it deep in her chest, a rush of love and relief washing over her. In that moment, every slight, every dismissal from her mother seemed to fade into the background. She knelt slightly as she handed him the package, her hands steady despite the pounding of her heart. Chaik's fingers brushed hers and he gave her a look filled with affection and pride. Amara, you didn't have to, he murmured, his voice gentle but carrying a hint of curiosity. But you had to. Not just for him but for herself. Carefully she began to explain the significance of the gift, the rare painting he had been searching for, the one that captured the memories and dreams he had often whispered about in private. Her voice was calm, controlled, but underneath, there was a quiet intensity, the kind that comes from holding a truth too long inside. Guests watched, some curious, some puzzled, as Amara lingered for a heartbeat before continuing. There was a pause, a momentary hush in the air as she prepared to reveal not just the gift, but the story behind it. She wasn't just presenting a painting, she was about to present the truth, a carefully measured revelation of love, dedication, and sacrifice that had gone unnoticed for years. Chaik's eyes softened further, his attention fully on her, and Amara felt the courage swell inside her. The stage was set. Every whispered insult, every dismissive glance from her mother had led to this moment, and now with the crowd watching she was ready to show them all exactly who she truly was. Amara's hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. She set the gift carefully on the table in front of her father and untied the delicate ribbon. The paper rustled softly as she lifted the lid, revealing the painting nestled inside. For a heartbeat, the room was filled with applause and smiles, the chatter of guests rising around them. Chaik's eyes lit up as he reached out, brushing his fingers over the edge of the painting, a soft laugh escaping him. But Amara wasn't finished. From inside the box she pulled out a neatly folded letter, its edges worn from careful handling. Clearing her throat she began to speak, her voice calm but carrying a quiet power that made the room fall silent. "Dad," she started, "this painting is special, but it's not the only gift I have for you tonight. I need you and everyone here to know something I've carried for years." She unfolded the letter and held it so her father could read along. "I've sacrificed a lot to support you, sometimes in ways no one knew. I quietly contributed to your company, funding projects, helping cover expenses when things got tough, all without recognition." She paused, letting her words sink in, scanning the room. Guests' eyes widened, murmurs rising like a ripple through the crowd. People whispered, some exchanging shocked glances, others leaning in closer to hear every word. Amara continued, her tone steady but filled with emotion. "I've also endured constant interference and emotional rejection from my mother, even in front of family and friends. She has tried to overshadow my efforts, diminish my successes, and make me feel invisible." A hush fell over the room as the reality of her words hit. Ifeoma's composure faltered. She shifted uncomfortably, a faint blush creeping across her cheeks. For the first time that evening, all eyes were on her, and she realized the spotlight had moved away from the celebration and directly onto Amara. Whispers circled the rooftop, guests craning their necks, some shocked, some impressed as the truth began to unfold before them. Amara's heart pounded, but she didn't stop. She held her ground, letting the letter speak the words that had been silenced for far too long. The painting was beautiful, yes, but the real masterpiece tonight was the truth she was finally revealing, and everyone could feel its impact. Amara took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the room on her shoulders, but also a rush of quiet power. She looked at her father, who was still holding the painting, his eyes shining with pride, completely unaware of what was coming next. "There's more," she said softly, her voice calm but firm, making the guests lean in a little closer. "I discovered something a few years ago," she continued, holding the letter in her hand. "A family trust that was left in your name, Dad. What most people didn't know is that I contributed to it, financially, quietly, without ever asking for credit or recognition. I did it because I believed in you, in our family, and in making sure your legacy would be secure." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few guests whispered to each other, shocked at the revelation. Eyes shifted, some incredulous, some impressed, as the truth began to take shape. Ifeoma's face, which had held its usual polished composure, started to tighten. She opened her mouth, clearly planning to say something, but no words came out. For the first time, her attempt to control the narrative, to claim credit or influence, was unraveling in front of everyone. Chaik blinked, a slow realization crossing his face. He looked between the letter and Amara, connecting pieces he had never known before. Expenses he thought were covered mysteriously, projects that had succeeded without explanation. All of it started to make sense. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for her, eyes wide with shock and growing admiration. Amara continued, her voice steady. "All my life I've worked quietly, doing what needed to be done, building not just my own path, but helping support our family in ways no one ever saw. I never asked for recognition. But tonight, I need the truth to be seen." The guests were silent now, the air thick with tension and awe. Even the most distant relatives leaned forward, trying to grasp the full weight of her words. Ifeoma's lips pressed into a thin line, her face pale, as the realization hit that she could no longer hide behind charm or influence. Chaik finally spoke, his voice shaking with emotion. "Amara, all these years, you've done all this?" He looked at her with new eyes, finally seeing the daughter who had given so much without asking for anything in return. And for the first time that night, Amara felt fully recognized, not just by him but by the truth she had finally revealed to the world. Amara straightened her shoulders and looked around the room. The laughter and chatter had faded into an uneasy silence as everyone waited to see what she would do next. She felt the weight of all those years. The dismissals, the comparisons, the quiet struggles, and she finally let them fuel her voice. Calm, steady, and strong she spoke, every word carrying the power of truth. "I built my life," she said, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of family, friends, and colleagues. "But I also built this family's foundation silently. I paid for things no one knew about. I worked behind the scenes, not for recognition, not for praise, but to keep this family going. I will not be invisible anymore." A hush fell over the rooftop. Even the music seemed to fade into the background as her words sank in. Guests glanced at one another, whispering softly, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. The air was electric, as if the room itself had paused to witness the truth finally being spoken. Ifeoma's face turned pale, her usual calm and controlled demeanor cracking. She opened her mouth, but no clever remark or dismissal came. Her eyes darted nervously around the crowd, realizing for the first time that her dominance, the influence she had wielded so effortlessly for years, was being questioned in front of everyone. Some relatives leaned closer to one another, whispering admiration for Amara's courage. "She finally stood up," one aunt murmured. "I can't believe she's saying this in front of everyone." Even those who had always sided with Ifeoma shifted uneasily in their seats, seeing her for the first time as someone fallible, someone no longer untouchable. Amara felt the thrill of empowerment course through her. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't attacking, she was simply stating the truth, plain and unshakable. And the effect was undeniable. All eyes were on her, all attention captured by her calm, unwavering presence. For the first time in decades, she was not a shadow in her mother's world. She was seen, she was heard, and she knew, deep in her heart, that this moment was only the beginning. Tonight, everyone would remember her. Not her mother, not the whispered doubts, but Amara, the daughter who had finally claimed her voice. Chaik stood slowly, holding the painting in his hands, his eyes fixed on Amara. The room was silent, the guests waiting, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. For a moment he looked at her not as his daughter, not as someone overshadowed by years of family tension, but as the person who had quietly carried so much for this family without ever asking for recognition. "Amara," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "I see you now." He paused, letting the words settle, letting everyone feel the weight behind them. "All these years your mother overshadowed your brilliance. But today I honor your contribution." The words hit Amara like a wave. Tears of relief and joy sprang to her eyes, rolling down her cheeks as she tried to blink them back. For so long she had longed for acknowledgement, for the simple truth that her efforts mattered. And now, standing in front of everyone she had loved and respected, she finally had it. Her father's recognition washed over her like sunlight, warm and healing, melting decades of invisible hurt. Around the rooftop, whispers turned to quiet awe. Guests exchanged glances, some nodding slowly, some holding their hands over their hearts. The energy of the room shifted. Admiration for Amara's courage and resilience filled the space. She could feel it in the way people leaned in to listen, in the way their eyes shone with respect. Ifeoma's face went pale. The control she had wielded for so many years, the narrative she had carefully crafted, was crumbling. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time she realized she could not twist this moment to her advantage. She could not hide behind charm, influence, or polite smiles. The truth was out, and it belonged to Amara. Chaik stepped closer, gently placing a hand on Amara's shoulder. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of decades of unspoken pride, love, and acknowledgement. Amara's heart swelled as she looked around at the faces of family and friends, feeling seen, valued, and finally recognized. In that moment she understood something powerful. Recognition was not just about praise. It was about being fully acknowledged for the sacrifices, the love, and the hard work that no one had seen before. And tonight, in front of everyone, that acknowledgement had finally come. Amara had claimed her place, and no one, not even her mother, could take it away. The room erupted in applause. Guests who had been watching in stunned silence now cheered for Amara, some rising to their feet, clapping, others laughing and whistling in admiration. Conversations bubbled with excitement, murmurs of awe spreading like wildfire. People who had always known her quietly, now openly celebrated her courage, her talent, and her unwavering strength. Amara's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on her mother. Ifeoma was frozen, her usual polished composure gone. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her gaze darted nervously, and for the first time she seemed completely powerless in the face of her daughter's truth. The cold control she had wielded for decades had evaporated in a single evening. Chaik stepped forward, his arms open, and pulled Amara into a warm, heartfelt embrace. "I'm so proud of you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Amara leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the reassuring strength in his arms. For the first time she felt the recognition she had longed for all her life, the simple, undeniable truth that she belonged, that she mattered, that her sacrifices and dedication had been seen. Her professional friends, some seated at the tables nearby, were smiling broadly, clearly impressed. They had known her as a rising talent, a brilliant designer, and a dedicated professional. But seeing her handle such a personal, high-stakes moment with grace and courage brought a new level of respect. Whispers of admiration passed through their group. "She's amazing," one colleague said under their breath. "I knew she was talented, but this is next level." Amara straightened, letting go of her father's embrace, and looked around the room. The atmosphere had shifted completely. People were no longer focused on the party itself or on the usual small talk. They were focused on her. Her story, her strength, and her courage had become the center of attention. Even though the night had started with tension and hurt, it ended with validation and pride. For the first time in decades, Amara felt fully seen, not just as a daughter, but as a woman who had built her life, her career, and her legacy through hard work and dedication. The applause and smiles weren't just for a birthday celebration. They were for her, for the truth, and for the powerful moment she had claimed in front of everyone. Tonight she was finally recognized, fully and undeniably. Amara walked slowly toward the exit, the soft hum of conversation and laughter fading behind her. Her heels clicked lightly against the polished floor as she held her head high, every step filled with quiet strength. Behind her, Iphioma trailed silently, her usual confidence gone, replaced by a humbled, uncertain silence. Amara didn't look back. There was nothing to see there anymore. As she stepped out into the cool night air of Victoria Island, she let herself breathe. The city lights shimmered around her, reflecting the glow of a night that had changed everything. In her mind, she replayed the evening, the whispers, the shocked faces, the warmth in her father's eyes, the applause from friends and family. A smile tugged at her lips. All my life I waited for recognition from the wrong person, she thought. Today I claimed my place, not just in this family but in my own life. She felt lighter, freer, like a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had finally lifted. Her phone buzzed quietly in her bag, notifications flashing from friends and colleagues. The video of the party the moment she spoke her truth was already going viral online. Messages poured in, celebrating her courage, her grace, and her brilliance. Her fashion brand, years of hard work, creativity, and sleepless nights, suddenly had an audience far bigger than she had imagined. Doors she hadn't even dared knock on were beginning to open. Amara paused for a moment under the glow of the streetlights, looking up at the city skyline. She felt powerful, alive, unstoppable. She had stood up, spoken her truth, and claimed her story. She didn't need anyone else's approval anymore. She tried to reject me publicly, but I became the story everyone will remember. And in that moment, Amara knew her life had changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She was unforgettable.